the transformative nature of Zarathustra comes down to his teleological message, and that he kind of orients the reader towards viewing themselves as part of this multi-generational process of becoming.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I have a special treat today. My friend Karl Nord, who is a student of biology and, of course, of Nietzsche. And he's been an important influence on me in terms of natalism and perspectives on the family. And, he calls Nietzsche's philosophy the philosophy of the child. And he's got a certain love of life and people that I think is healthy and worth propagating. So without further ado, I present to you Karl Nord in our conversation, which I've dubbed Zarathustran Epiphanies. I'll just describe you as a philosopher, but you're obviously much more than that, right? You're like a fantasy author, or like, sorry, yeah, go, like, what would you?
No, that's like way good enough.
Fantasy author, philosopher, social critic, jolly person.
Let's just
Artist.
go with the last thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, so we were just talking about how you said that rule breaking is a demonstration of strength, which I really like that idea. And I cut you off before I decided to record.
Yeah, no, just that men and women have different perceptions of it, and like, I don't know, it's terrible, but I don't know if you, when you were a kid, if you ever stole something, and but it is, there's a reason that people get addicted to stealing, right? There's something that goes on in your brain, and it's just like, whoa, that is a rush. And now, of course, like, I remember I was a kid and I stole a pack of Pokemon cards. I went to the bathroom, I opened it, I threw away the packaging, and then I stuffed the Pokemon cards in my pocket. And then I felt so bad. I think I was like 10 or 9. I never stole again, like, not purposefully. Like, I've left a job and accidentally held on to something, but I wasn't intentional. Yeah. So, but but that same transgressive behavior actually underlies a lot of intellectual activity, because people get off on just disagreeing for the sake of it. And yeah, I don't know, there's something about individuality and individualism that is built on that, like, basic psychological silliness.
Yeah, a couple of things. So the first time I remember intentionally stealing, like deciding to break the rules, I went to the convenience store next to my place, and I picked up some candy, and it was physically interesting, like it was intense, and my heart was racing, my sense of awareness was increased, right? Like watching what everyone's doing, right? Rather than being in myself, right? But then the guilt of it, like, because I got away with it, right? Because I was very well behaved generally, right? But the guilt was just like gnawing at me. I'm like, I can't handle this, right? It's just having this cloud of negative emotion. I guess would be the super ego just like lashing me or something, right? So yeah, that was painful. And I haven't intentionally stolen, but I feel like something like torrenting or like that's sort of a gray area. Like I don't know if you grew up with stuff like Kazaa or LimeWire or Napster.
Oh yeah. I definitely did. Yeah, I was a LimeWire generation. Yeah. But when you're not, I guess when you're, that didn't feel the same to me, because I don't know, for some reason you're so detached from the, like, no one cares if you download shit on LimeWire, actually. Like, yeah, like, you'll get the Millennium copyright thing pop up, but it's like, what are they gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, it's especially interesting with the woman who runs Sci-Hub, right? Like she's almost seen like an international terrorist or something.
Right. Who is the one guy? Did he kill himself over it?
Right. I think Schwartz.
Schwartz. Yeah, the Schwartz. Yeah, I didn't ever get a hold of the whole thing he sent out, but that's just because I have access to the peer-reviewed stuff anyway, so I don't care. But
and okay, so do you like reading books on your computer, or do you normally read physical?
no,
No, okay.
I much prefer physical copies. Yeah, like yeah, you know, right in my lap. You know, I can't stand it. I do read on the computer. I read what did I read recently? I read it was a fantasy, Japanese fantasy manga, like Ascendance of a Bookworm. Anyway, it's just a silly story. But yeah, I read that on the computer. It was miserable. Oh my lord.
Just because, I mean, what kind of like setup do you have? Do you have a big screen? Do you have an ergonomic chair? You know, like, do you enjoy being at the computer?
I guess big comfy chair, not an ergonomic chair, but it's like I guess I sit Indian cross leg. I actually recommend this for people that they get a chair that's big enough where they can pull their knees up, where they get a stool. Um, uh, if you're gonna be sitting there for a long time. But yeah, that I have two monitors. I don't know.
Okay, and do you remember when you first read Zarathustra? Was it, you know, like I think there's a part in Ecce Homo where Nietzsche talks about, you know, people taking their shoes off and like respectfully reading his work. You know, did you read his book with the
No, I mean, no. I guess I read Zarathustra when I was feeling pretty down.
Mm.
So I guess, yeah, I guess you have to have your shoes off for that, maybe.
So you were feeling pretty down, and you found that his book made you feel better, worse, different?
I think the transformative nature of Zarathustra comes down to his teleological message, and that he kind of orients the reader towards viewing themselves as part of this multi-generational process of becoming. And it's actually not just you. I think when people read the text and they somehow make it all personal psychological, I think it's very silly because in many passages he's talking about, for example, on marriage, thus I call the will of two to create one that is higher than them both, right?
Mm.
So, you know, and so I think some of the stuff should be read more literally, even the parts that are distasteful, or not just distasteful, but kind of fascistic. So yeah, I guess so. I read Nietzsche that way. I don't give him any I don't make him metaphorical when he's not. I think people approach the Bible in the wrong way sometimes too. Like where it's like they try to smear it so that it's not as scary. But sometimes people say and do awful things. And when you hide from that, you're just create, like we're all like we this is the weird thing, is that I think it is actually anti children to create a society that treats everyone like children, because children need to become adults. And and I think there's some of that, like desire to make everything comfortable is like that, or that's where it's coming from.
Desire to make everything comfortable. Do you find that you had a surfeit of comfort when you were growing up?
Absolutely, right?
Really?
Yeah. So this is the secure exploration theory, right? That the more secure you have, or your secure attachment makes you open to dangerous situations. I forget where I learned this.
Really?
Yeah, but it has to do with kids. Like if kids have a secure attachment to their parent, they will be more likely to engage in risk-taking behavior because they have a safe base.
Huh. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is thinking of, you know, rich kids who like go on these crazy drug binges, or, you know, drive way too fast in luxury cars. Yeah.
Yeah, prodigal son behavior. Right.
Okay. Um, I mean, I wonder like what the volitional locus is of comfort, right? Because I think of, some people are making it their mission to make the world a bit more nerfed, right? To round all the edges, right? And one of the places where I see that um, like taking place most horrifically is horrifically maybe exaggerated, but is with pets, right? Because they're kind of being turned into little like eternal children, right? Like they're always
Yeah.
helpless and vulnerable. They're dressed up in these cute little clothes. It's fun. It's fun enough just to watch them eat. Like there's nothing expected of them. They're always adorable. People baby talk to them, and I mean, I wonder though if that isn't just like a symptom of like a general like domestication of human beings. But like,
Yeah, yeah, it is. So, domestication. What's really interesting is that evolutionarily speaking, for mammals, there are all these. Maybe I should link the article on the podcast, but there's all these traits that are actually shared among different species of mammals that happen when you get these domestication traits, and it has to do with the differentiation of the neural plate. And if it has a slower differentiation, then you get these domestication traits, which are actually like floppy ears in cows and dogs and cats and all sorts of animals or mammals. Like they did the fox experiments out in Russia, and the floppy ears happened again because they're a domestication trait, right? So, and these are actually happening in people too, right? So, because of course we're mammals, like, so I'll have to get this article, but yeah, it was really good. I remember reading that. It was just amazing.
I don't know if it was the same one, but it was about conspiratorial killing. Like basically they were saying that one of the reasons that human beings have much lower reactive aggression than of other great apes, or our monkey cousins, is that like normally in primate groups it's hard for people who are lower in the hierarchy to attack or topple the person on the top. Like you might be able to cooperate with one other guy and take him down, but usually you can't. But they're saying like with symbolic communication, you can get a bunch of really weak losers together to all just like swarm the main guy. And like anytime someone acts up, you just kill him. And so all of the most aggressive members of the group have basically been culled. And so like we've like selected the most domesticated versions of ourselves over and over again for hundreds of thousands of years, to the point where, like you say, we're like domesticated animals. We're more gregarious, less prone to reactive aggressively, and yeah. So like it seems as if the deck is stacked against us if we try to escape from that domestication. Even though like when I look at like a really tiny dog, right, who has no ability to fend for itself, who's like completely helpless, it fills me with a very uncomfortable feeling of like, what if I'm like that, or what if our future generations will be like that, right? Where they are physically incapable of being individuals. They're physically constrained in their freedom. I don't know. It's a scary thought.
Well, this is coming back again to the value of transgressive behavior, right? So I think intelligence is inherently linked to transgressive behavior. So because it's innovative, right? Like you have to be willing to say no in order to get somewhere, right? And I have something silly here. I have a quote. Let me. An adult says, "I will not yield," and a child says, "No." Which one is really smarter? One is all pomp, station, and brazen self-awareness, and the other is an unthinking dominance. The artifice of society clouds the will, right? So I think what happens is like children are even incredibly disagreeable sometimes, and I think this is part of us. So the domestication is also a cultural thing, right? So, but I don't like, there is an inherent tension between like society and like group selection and like the individual's value that they provide to society, right? So, because all ideas have to be thought up in someone's brain, right? Like it has to happen individually before it can be shared, right? So you still have to have a baseline level of intelligence. So what you get, and I think this is where play behavior is so important, right? So like people, and this is, I often, people complain when other people are being irrational, but I often find that other people are being irrational because you're making them feel unsafe. Okay, if you keep it in a game form, if you keep it in art, if you keep it in metaphor, if you keep it in sarcasm or silliness, I think most anyone can talk logically about most problems because they're not worrying about their physical safety, right? Like if you threaten someone's status or power, of course you're going to get a reaction. That's like an attack on them, right? You're attacking their status. And like, why would you do that, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a silly thing, you know. So like people often say humans are irrational. No, they are just committed to their personhood because you have to be a person to have ideas, right? So personhood is first.
You have to be a person to have ideas. Like I'm trying to think, of our ancestors millions of years ago and how like what how it would be very difficult to describe anything they do as irrational in the sense that like it all serves some kind of function, right? And I remember there was a time in school when we were studying people who collect, right? And it really bugged me how they were described as irrational, where I thought like there must be some kind of function that fulfills. So like even when people are like deeply irrational, like they have these crazy emotional outbursts, it's like it makes sense to me to say that like there is something that I guess is being threatened because threat is so basic, right? Like I'm sure the brain centers for that are buried quite deep. Um, but like when it comes to let's say innovation, um, something that stuck out to me when listening to Islamic thinkers is how hostile they are to the idea of innovation. Although there's also space eked out for them. So there's this concept called the ghuraba, right, which is like the outsider, and he's kind of venerated because like he's different, he's strange, but there's never the expectation that everyone's going to be like that. It's like a romantic idea of someone who's like a little bit innovative, but definitely like the pressure is to conform. um but surely like conformity is quite pleasant and fun sometimes.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think the thing with Islam and maybe every religion or any political, I should say political religion, people often miss the point that the politics is important, that the politics exists to keep people safe, to guard their values, to make sure the family is okay. Like criticizing Muslim values is like criticizing Christian values. It's just very silly because you're approaching it with this like when the new atheists approach it, they're approaching it with this like logical like is this strictly empirically true? Well, the empirical truth of the matter is irrelevant because these beliefs exist in a political context for providing people with their well-being, right? So it's actually not a question of truth, it's actually a question of usefulness. And I would say most human ideas are built out of usefulness rather than their truth value. So, and this is what I mean by you have to be a person before you can have ideas. So like people like to create an is-ought dichotomy, but really every time you do anything, you're behaving with some means to some ends. There's some normative quality in every statement, every action, every human being has ever made. And you're touching on that when you're saying, oh, these people are being irrational, and then they dismiss the behavior. Well, yeah, of course you shouldn't dismiss the behavior. The irrational behavior is actually really, really important. And I guess this brings me to the main polemic I wanted to present today. Human actions are means to ends. If you place the end in the individual, then it ends. If you place the end in the child, then it recurs eternally. Humanity's existence is predicated on this eternal recurrence. Objectively speaking, our good, if it is to be timeless at all, is forced into the child by the requirements of our existence. So I'm saying objective morality, in quotes, is necessarily bound and determined by, Darwinistically, we could describe inclusive reproductive fitness. Inclusive meaning like Hamilton's rule or kin selection, stuff like that.
Okay, could you please explain what Hamilton's rule is? You sent me the Wikipedia article, but I gave up pretty quickly because it looked very complicated.
Oh, it's not. It's not. All it's saying is that if your relatedness, okay, the more related you are, okay, I am half of my mother, right? If I were to take some action that benefited me, and I was, okay, let's say I could do something and it would give me 2 cookies. If I did the same thing, it would give my mom 4 cookies. Then it wouldn't matter whether I did it for myself or my mother. But if doing that action would give my mom 6 cookies and it would give me 1 cookie, then I would give my mom 6 cookies.
Is this at all related to that phrase of like, I would gladly lay down my life for, like 2 brothers or 8 cousins?
Yeah,
or something?
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I would gladly lay my life down for like 16-second covenants. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's actually a solution to the trolley problem. So you can, it's a cute way of solving it. But genetically speaking, this is like, I think objectively true of systems. There's, so it can, like, it's the reason why there are beehives, for example.
It's the reason why there are beehives.
Yeah, so like there was some behavior selected for on like a Pareto front, which is like a series of behaviors. You have, okay, let's say I have a cooking ability.
Okay.
Now, my cooking ability can make cookies, cakes, and like mangoes, like mango salad. Okay. So my cooking ability can either be optimized for cookies, cakes, or mango salad. But general cooking ability is the Pareto front, right? So let's say that only my mom can eat mango salad. Like some species are going to evolve in the direction of just only making mango salad for your mom.
Okay.
Right. Anyway, so that's, I don't know. It's probably, that's not a complete way of talking about it, but that's the pointed direction you want to go if you're interested in exploring that type of stuff, I guess.
But so like, one thing I struggle with this this idea of laying down your life for like a certain relative, depending on how distant they are from your particular genes, right? What I find problematic with that is like how like that might make sense on like a huge time scale for most biological creatures, but then when I think of some people who might actually benefit much more in, let's say, a religious group where they have fictive kin, rather than paying attention to like how their who their families are, you know what I mean? So it would be strange for someone who's like, let's say, abused by their parents, right, to like or like their, let's say, their brother. It would make more sense. Let's say someone has like a really abusive sibling, right? It wouldn't really make sense to care about them if there's some random stranger that is gonna be awesome to them, right? So like the ability for us to make fictive kin, I feel like really blows open the possibilities, and it's not really clear to me how to like work around that. Although I remember Pinker saying that on the whole, stepchildren are at greater risk of being abused than biological children. And so I think there are like basic biological limits on like how much you can care about certain people, and that like it just so happens that like we're wired to care more about people who are close to us. But then I wonder, given that we know this fact, like we could technically program, like, use CRISPR to like make human beings that like just don't care about like kin, like they function on some other level. I don't know if that's relevant for us now. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
No, it is relevant. It is relevant. So I guess give me like 2 minutes to answer this whole topic. I'm going to take a big detour.
Okay.
I'm going to quote some Aristotle.
All right. I'm
So
down for it.
1097b, what is the function of man? For as the goodness and the excellence of a piper or a sculptor, or the practicer of any art, and generally of those who have any function or business to do, lies in that function, so man's good would seem to lie in his function, if he has one. Okay, so Aristotle then goes on to discuss man's various functions. And he says this of the irrational part. So this is 1102a. Of the irrational part, again, one division seems to be common to all things that live and to be possessed by plants. I mean that which causes nutrition and growth. For we must assume that all things that take nourishment have a faculty of this kind, even when they are embryos, and have the same faculty when they are full grown. At least this is more reasonable to suppose than that they have a different one. The excellence of this faculty, then, is playing one that shares is plainly one that man shares with other beings and not specifically human. And then he goes on to say, however, we need not pursue this further and may dismiss the nutritive principle since it has no place in the excellence of man. Aristotle, in his definition of teleological good, goes along with Plato, and it's not ground, he's going with the mind, and he says that virtue is the ultimate excellence of man, and that is like the excellence of a sculptor is how he sculpts, the excellence of man is how he becomes virtuous. So now what does this have to do with what you were asking previously about whether or not human beings should consciously engage in kin selective or group selective behavior, and also given the fact that they have some inherent instinct to engage in both kin selective and group selective behavior, and in what direction should we move? Like, this is a normative question, right? Well, Aristotle seems to think none of this matters at all, right? We should just be virtuous, right? That is the essence of man's nature, and that we should be one with wisdom, and that by being one with wisdom, we're, it's the Platonic silliness of, then the soul is at harmony, and then, when you die, you go up to, if your soul has been at harmony with wisdom, then you go to heaven, right? That's the conception of Platonist, like, heaven, right? That's how you get to heaven. You just you placate your soul with wisdom, and then it feels at harmony, and then eventually it becomes light. And anyway, if you want to read more about this, you read Phaedo. So, but actually Aristotle does subscribe to this in some fashion. So it's funny when people say that he's an empiricist, when actually he's dismissing the nutritive quality, or the nutritive faculty, and he's saying, yes, we should go up. Okay, so should we be group selective or kin selective? Well, I would say that insofar as it is in your nature to be a thing, then you should live in harmony with your nature, right? Now, this obviously leads to some kind of silly statements, like if someone feels like murdering, should they murder? Well, if it's in your nature and you really got to murder, and then you murder, and then you get murdered for murdering, no one's going to be surprised, okay? So I'm not saying, like, obviously you can take, like, you can use your forebrain, like your forebrain is part of your nature, right? Like, so, but some people have a very limited ability to control, let's say, like if you're a dark triad personality, they just, they were born criminals, you know? And yeah, like, why should we be surprised if someone acts that way? So insofar as you have conscious will, then we come to the main statement that I think you should do what is, I don't know, I guess you should live in harmony with your nature. And there's something like you were pointing out earlier, that we're tending towards a more pro-social animal or a more domesticated animal. And I would say fighting against that, if you wanted to fight against that, you would fight against it only insofar as there is value in the antisocial element for sociality in general, right? So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but it jumps around it a bit.
I mean, it's an extremely difficult question to answer, I think, too, just because like I'm asking for like, to get an answer to that is basically getting like a whole plan for society, like for the world, kind of, right? Because so in my estimation, so much of like the fictive kin of religious groups is an attempt at social cohesion. I think you mentioned this in chat once, where you talk about them as like groups built on ethical behavior, right? And that's what I like about, you know, church too, like in the sense that it's not really about anything other than people. I mean, technically they would say that it's about God and the soul and Christ and all, or, you know, their prophets, but like when it comes down to it, like it's about being able to, you know, reflect on your behavior and then try to modify it, and then to try to understand other people, to work together. There's this, I was thinking about this when, you know, Nietzsche in Zarathustra talks about how, you know, there's a section where he talks about how frustrating it is that people who are quote unquote good, that they lie a lot, right? But then I'm wondering, you know, like how does that square with his point and what you said earlier about how, you know, people look to things that are useful. So, you know, I mean, as a caricature, I don't think Nietzsche would believe this, but I'm thinking like, let's say I'm singing a hymn, right? And it would, like, in order for me to speak my truth, I would just like change whatever words are being sung to suit something that I would like, but it would just like destroy the harmony, right? So it's like, is there not some cases where lying and like suppressing quote unquote your truth or what you feel is just the better thing to do?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, art is a lie, you know, like if we lie in art, well, this is because truth isn't understood out of a context. Truth is only understood in a context, and contexts are actually power structures. So you can't saw off the branch you're sitting on, right? So like our relationship or your relationship with anyone else is predicated on some kind of mutually beneficial assumption, right? This is like the ethical unity that religion forces us into. Sometimes it uses force, other times it uses persuasion. But this assumption, though, sorry, if you were to break this, right, you would be breaking the ethical unity. And as soon as you break this ethical unity, then other people are going to break it too. And what happens is that the mutualism breaks down into like a predator-prey situation. So it's like game theory, like the optimal. So whether or not a mutualism develops is dependent on the game that you're dealing with. So how do I put this? I think there's a tendency in nature, actually in general, for larger systems to evolve. And those larger systems are in some sense mutually beneficial because they have to maintain a bunch of parts and stand on each other. So like if you look at biofilms have self-regulating behavior. Or they regulate the behavior, they evolve to regulate the behavior of the individual organisms within the biofilm. actually. So the members of a biofilm have, of the cellular members of a biofilm, the bacteria have different behavior regulated by the biofilm, so that they're not engaging in antisocial behavior. So like when we describe biofilms as like little bacteria cities, it's actually true. So the evolution of multicellular organisms is in some sense dependent on this type of cooperative behavior. So this doesn't even need consciousness to occur. This is just some game theoretic thing that happens in organisms which are pursuing their own benefit, right? Where they get into an alignment where their benefit and other things benefit. And because of the asymmetry of power, right? Like Sun Tzu says, you know, take all of your power and attack them where they're weakest, right? Well, this gives larger organisms an advantage, right? Among other reasons, right? So you can imagine then that this tends to lead towards larger and larger groups, larger and larger groupings. And this is where you get to like something like Plato. It might go back further, I don't know, but the organismal conception of society, that we are all organs within society, we have different functions, we should engage cooperatively, right? And that this also goes back to domestication, right? Because domestication, part of that is making people perform their role in society, right?
I mean, when you're saying that, I'm thinking about how, like, Aristotle talks about the distribution of people who are able to, you know, command, who like have command of logos, and people who can like sort of understand logos, but they can't command it themselves, right? So it's like, I mean, normally this is he doesn't have the greatest reputation about his views on slavery, right? But like in a way, it seems like there must be something happening there biologically, right? Because like some people really do seem to be more submissive, more built to listen and serve other people, right? Like some people are just more headstrong. Like is that mostly culture? Is that something that like is represented in people's genetics? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so, but I mean, good luck finding science on this, because you know, it's not even politically correct to say someone has a nature anymore, right? Like that's actually you know, you take what I said, I'd be accused of essentialism, right? Well, obviously I'm an Aristotelian and I, you know, went to school for biology, so of course I'm going to be accused of essentialism. Like, yeah, but I think people are delusional when they say we're not slaves. Like modern society, it has its own slave nature, and it forces, like, you know, go read some communist literature. They'll show you how, you know, we are actually still slaves. Like the name has changed. You have some freedom. The advantage of the modern system is that it takes people who are naturally disagreeable and it puts them in naturally jobs that are naturally good for disagreeable people, and it takes subservient people and it rewards them for their subservience if they if they can handle the responsibility, right? Like you can make a lot of money just by actually doing what you're told. Like people who actually do what they're told in school are become part of the professional managerial class, and they do very well for themselves, and they should be rewarded, because we do need people who just do what they're told, right? So it's very important, right? So I think when you look at organic harmony, you're allowing people to do what's in their nature, and you're finding some productive place for them to express themselves. So when Nietzsche says be yourself, this is actually what we mean, right? Like, and ideally, you know, this is what happens for people.
And then of course, yeah, I mean, that totally resonates, right? Like I think of, you know, what it takes to be a doctor, like one of the most respected professions. Like generally speaking, doctors aren't like in their labs by themselves, like doing experiments and like trying to figure out what biology is, right? Like you have to just memorize and like listen and do what you're told. Like I remember someone pointed out that like a lot of medicine is mostly built on like a priestly caste, right? Like where you're like handed down knowledge, and like clinical practice doesn't really reflect the latest research. It takes time to be incorporated and stuff like that, right?
No, doctors have responsibility, so they're not going to blow up a whole golf course to get a couple gophers, right?
Okay.
So,
But
so a scientist is someone who blows up a whole golf course to get a couple gophers, right? They don't give a shit. They're just like, fuck the golf course. I want to get these gophers, right? But the doctor cares about the golf course, right? He has responsibility. So, and this is actually coming back to disagreeable people versus people who are not disagreeable people, is whether or not they value the golf course or whether or not they want to get rid of the gophers.
Like what they focus on.
Yeah, and it's I think it's in their nature.
I mean, I really like how in gay science, and I'm sure elsewhere, Nietzsche talks about how like it's distasteful to him to have ethics and values that negate, where it's like, you know, don't do this, don't do that, right? And he's like trying to focus on things they do like. And so I wonder, like, if
can I give a quote in here?
Yeah, of course.
Alas, there are so many great thoughts which do no more than a bellows. They puff up and make emptier. You call yourself free. Your dominant thought I want to hear, and not that you have escaped from a yoke. Are you one of those who had the right to escape from a yoke? There are some who threw away their last value when they threw away their servitude. Free from what? As if that mattered to Zarathustra. But your eyes should tell me brightly, free for what? I mean, that's sorry, I'll give the context. On the way of the creator, thus spoke Zarathustra, part 1.
I mean, like, see, when I hear stuff like that, it maybe you relate to this, but like Nietzsche has this ability to make me feel like, you know, an inch tall, like whenever he's speaking, where he's like, I'm just so anxious to be like on his good side. Like whenever he's saying, I'm just like biting my nails, like, oh, I hope he's not gonna like call me out on some. But he
funny.
always gets me. Like he'll always find some point of weakness of mine to destroy.
Well, in this image, it's like we're some cow, right? And we've got a yoke on us, and he's talking to us. He's talking like we're chewing cud, right? He's talking to us. And then he's asking, do your eyes shine bright, Mr. Cow? And then you look at him with bright eyes, you know?
Okay, yeah.
So, but I think the key of that speech is freedom from what or freedom for what, right? So freedom is a negative value. And as you were saying, fuck negative values, man. Like, it's actually my problem with libertarianism is it defines itself in terms of negative values, when actually the value of cooperative behavior is why we have a society, right? So, like, yes, liberty exists as a negative right to fight against tyranny, which is ownership without responsibility, right? That's what tyranny is. But ownership done responsibly has some holistic value, right? Like, for example, just the creation of a free market, right? Like if you create a large economic zone where people are able to act freely, that's a value, right? That's a positive value created through force, through the state, right? Or whatever organization you want to talk about.
I want to ask you about the acrobat in Zarathustra, because or the rope walker, because there was this Buddhist teacher named Larry Rosenberg. He's part of the Theravada tradition, and he gives this example of this acrobatic group called the Flying Walandas, and he's saying that he saw this interview with one of the main guys saying that like he only feels truly alive when he's on the wire, when he's walking on this wire. But Larry was saying that, you know, the point of Buddhism is kind of the opposite of that, in the sense that they want to make every moment of your life valuable and rich, right? And so in a way, like when I feel like from the outside, the Buddhist life is one of like poverty and just boredom and just like the daily drudge, just like no joy, no happiness. But like the way he describes the ambition there is that like they're so greedy that they want the beauty of like being a tightrope walker, but like kind of spread out throughout your entire life. And it just so happens that one of the flying Walandas, he went ahead with a performance during a really windy day and he fell to his death. And he's like, well, it's kind of tragic that you divide your life into these giant swaths of boredom and striving, and then you have these dangerous little clips of happiness, and it ends in your death. And I'm a bit torn because I can see the value that Nietzsche purports through his character of Zarathustra as like not being this like timid little last man who's just content with like a little bit of happiness and comfort and just like this smooth veneer of satisfaction, right? It's about like taking risks and living life to the fullest, right? But then I also appreciate just like that, the simple pleasure of just like eating a good meal, right? Or just having a nice walk in the forest or something. So I don't know how you make sense of that.
I think sometimes it's revolutionary to be a cow.
I love that.
So, and Nietzsche uses a lot, actually, this isn't Nietzsche. Nietzsche uses a ton of cow metaphors, right? And he like, it's a positive thing to be a cow chewing your cud, right? That's how you chew ideas. You're just, right? And yeah, he's really derisive of the herd animal, but he also thinks of himself as a cow. So I actually don't have a good answer. I think existence is broken up into moments and that you should give each moment that moment's due, right? So like, it's very similar to something Aristotle would say. Maybe he says this and I'm just repeating it and I don't remember the passage. But that like it's like how you deal with certain ages in your life, right? Like when you're a young man, be a young man, like take risks, go on an adventure, be silly, do something silly. And when you're a middle-aged man, act like a middle-aged man. When you're an old man, I'm sorry, you can't have 3 beers a night anymore, sir. Like you'll kill yourself, I mean, some guys do, that's their business, but if they're trying to behave their age, they won't have, more than 2 beers a night.
I mean, the first question that comes to mind is how would you know exactly? But then I think of all the ways in which my body punishes me for any sort of transgression, right? Like I stretch the wrong way or something.
Yeah, your body is a temple, like when you're young, you don't think that, but that's because you're young, it's fine. But as you get into middle age, you really have to start taking care of it because it's in your 30s that you make your 40s, right?
Right. Child is father to the man. There's a part in Antichrist I want to get your thoughts on that, like I found a bit confused, not confusing, but I wish there was more to it. So it's a really funny part. Well, he'll quote a section from the Gospels and then just have this like, oh well, that's interesting, or like he'll have this like really mean sarcastic add-on, and it's funny.
I do not like his attitude in that book in general. Yeah, sorry, go on.
But yeah, so but and then like he'll find parts that are like a bit silly and embarrassing, so he laughs at them. But the last section that he quotes is specifically about how the body is a temple, like for the Holy Spirit or whatever. And he's like, for this we cannot have enough contempt. But I didn't quite understand what his perspective is. I guess one way to look at it is that you're taking this very abstract idea of Holy Spirit and God, which is completely outsized and beyond your capability of understanding, and then kind of like stuffing it into your own body. But then I think, well, if people really do follow that, I think they would just be better people and behave better. I don't know if if that passage struck you, or if you have any thoughts on it.
No, I guess I'm thinking of maybe he's referring to the cornerstone of the temple, and then Christ saying the temple is, through him, and that the temple is in you. I forget these passages. He might be referring to that general thing, and maybe the spiritualization of the body. But I'm sorry, I don't have any commentary.
It's okay. If I'd like to ask you about what you once described to me as what might be called the Zarathustran epiphany, specifically about the role of children, family, and birth.
Yeah, I have a book I want to plug. It is, let's see if I can do this. Oh, upside down. It's backwards. John Gardner in the Suicide Mountains. Let me get
it looks fine on my screen. Yeah. Okay. Oh, richly illustrated. Cute.
I'm gonna spoil this story. I'm sorry. The story is about a six-fingered man who's a criminal, and he's killed this pastor, and he's inhabiting the identity of the pastor. And the book is about figuring out that he's the villain, born as a small child as the pastor.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you please just repeat that last part? You cut out.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the story is about this villain, the six-fingered man, and when he dies at the end of the book, he's reborn as the pastor that he's stolen the identity of when he's alive. Right? He's like a skinwalker assassin. It's silly.
Wow.
Anyway, but the reason I want to plug the book is because it's very Zarathustrian, insofar as. Sorry, could you repeat? Your question was, what is the primary teleological significance of the child?
I guess so. It's just I remember you mentioned that you had this epiphany while reading Zarathustra that like changed your mind about how you feel about birth and having kids.
Yeah, it's exactly my polemic that I stated earlier, that the individual is an end.
Okay.
So so this is why people get into hedonistic despair, and why they need to be connected to some form of eternity or their dharma, right? So if you were going to make this Indian, it would be dharma. You would be connected to eternity, and part of that is you're being connected to your nature, which is actually eternal. So we're in a relay race with our parents, and their parents and their parents and their parents' parents, and so on and so forth. A great chain of being. And they pass you the baton, and they expect you to pass the baton down. Now, not everyone passes the baton down, right? It's fine. But that doesn't mean you're not part of this process, right? And when you join a cause, any cause, you're essentially saying, I am participating in this great chain of life. And when you feel good in your nature, then it's because you are fulfilling this part of yourself that you just are, right? So, and this is the epiphany. The epiphany for me was moving away from viewing myself as an individual and seeing myself as a collective person. But to point out, though, too, this is actually very, very, I've been reading, and this is very common for people who hit the age of 30. It's called becoming a parent. And even if you don't become a parent, you still psychologically do this on some level. So anyway, it's I don't have the exact literature to talk about, but yeah.
There's another thing that you said that I found really interesting in our earlier talk, where you said that people who focus on themselves are in a protracted state of childhood, and I wonder what advice you'd give to someone who's stuck there, right? Because it's like, well, how do I find a cause? How do I, maybe it's something you can't do, or something you can't tell someone to do.
I mean, stop eating. I mean, this is very Petersonian. stop eating your mom's cookies and make her some cookies.
Right.
Yeah, go make grandma some cookies, asshole.
Just do good, basically.
Well, I haven't ever seen a word do anything. They don't get up off the page and do things. You have to do that, right?
And you also mentioned in earlier talk about how people who don't have kids like need to learn to grieve that fact, right? And so
yeah, for sure.
And like, what does that look like? Like, I know there's
I'll tell you what it looks like for some people. Some people use the phrase fur babies. And I don't like that phrase, because they're investing all of their parental nature in a animal. And I think they're missing something, because they should be it's like your altruism, right? You're put on the planet, you're given so much energy of different types. And one of those types of motivations you have within you is altruism. And when you act altruistically for an animal, it's actually not what your nature intended, right? It's just like when people have sex and they don't have children ever, right? Mm-hmm. It's very weird, very weird. Like the whole notion of birth control is actually very weird. Like, and people know this on some level, but like they don't realize how detached from the body they are becoming by having sex and then not having kids, right? Because usually when you have sex, you have children, and then you change. Your life takes over and it moves into a different direction. Because I'll tell you what, you think you're in the saddle, life is in the saddle and it rides mankind, right? That's an old Emerson quote. And and so you've missed this like train stop, because everyone decided it was profitable in terms of GDP for you to not have children, right? So everyone's been like obsessed with GDP. Well, GDP is bullshit, right? Like, yeah, it's contra. Like, there's this reactive force of capitalism, and then there's the defensive force of human dignity. And we don't have to call it capitalism. We can just call it the market. And they've been fighting forever, right? And I think people often don't see how they're being used by society, and that they're a vessel for other people's. Yeah, I mean, there's an old thing: if you don't have a purpose, someone else will make someone else will bend you to their purpose, right? I mean, it's that same saying.
There was a book that you mentioned you read by a woman named Tara. I forget her last name. Strange Rights.
Oh yeah, Strange Rights, yeah.
Yeah, and like I think one of her ideas in that was that the internet is acting like a sort of like hyper Protestant Reformation, where people have the not only access to like the main spiritual text, right, like in their own language, but to like all texts of all like traditions and everything, and they can kind of cobble together their own religions for themselves, right? And I wonder if you've struggled with that fact that you have so many different things to choose from to like base your life on or focus on.
Well, I want to separate again religion as a structure of power versus religion as wisdom.
Okay.
I think when you approach a particular religion, you do so out of, okay, let's pretend that you or me and you were an atheist younger in life, and then you went to school for biology. So when I approach a Christian text, it's out of respect for the tradition, out of love of the tradition, out of wanting to engage authentically with God. And so I think it's cultural. So it's power oriented. So when you say, like, if someone asks you to identify as some religion and then you say, I'm New Age, right? You're identifying with a religion there, actually. You're identifying with this liberal, new agey religion, right? Which is a thing. It's got power in it. There are people who have positions in society that make decisions based on their understanding of this. And similarly, if you say I'm a Christian, you're making a political identification. So I think it's really, so intellectually, you should go for whatever you find is most fun or beautiful or, striking. But then I think the answer often there is like someone like Nietzsche, because Nietzsche is, he's a clown. And it's good to learn from the clown. He knows something about both sides.
Right. When it comes to Nietzsche, like, do you find that you abstain from recommending him to certain people? Like, I remember that story about
absolutely. You should absolutely not recommend him to people who cannot parse him, who aren't. I mean, if someone's not already an atheist, it's just probably a terrible idea to even talk about him. I mean, because he just says shit that's meant to make them crazy, right? But he's doing that so that he gets labeled the devil, because he wants to be Cao Cao. He wants to be Cao Cao, from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. He wants to be the devil. Nietzsche wants to inhabit. He wants to be the heel. Like, if we're doing pro wrestling, he's like, he's like there to be the bad guy on purpose, right? He wants you to hate him. That's actually the goal. So, yeah. So unless you know that it's a joke, it's like Satanism, like LaVey did this, and it was cute, like whatever. But like people are, it's like the whole metal movement is like this. Nietzsche is just the father of modern metal.
I've even been thinking that he's the father of modern rap, like the kind of attitude that he has, like of, sometimes he has these glimpses of, flipping the world around so that master morality is at the top, where it's all about like wealth and strength and just loving yourself. I feel like there's a strain of that in rap, right? Where they like completely reject all social norms in favor of, materialistic wealth and, self-aggrandizement and like violence without conscience, like these sorts of things. That's interesting. So you find that so when you say that it's a joke, like what comes to mind is the passage in Zarathustra where he's talking about how, like he's like laughing when he's listening to people talk, like debating God, right? And he has this phrase of, there is no God but gods, right? And like, to me, that tracks, especially when you look at the history of the church, where it's like everyone makes their own interpretation, and functionally it is polytheism, but it's like ostensibly monotheistic, even though there's like almost no harmony in what they actually think. So it's almost like an empirical description. I don't know, does that make sense at all?
Oh yeah. If you have an empirical orientation, then you can read Nietzsche, even if you don't. Even if you are religious, but as long as you have an empirical orientation, I would say. Like rationalists literally have nothing. They don't like the English tradition obviously has no understanding of Nietzsche. Like, and it's funny because Nietzsche actually inspires the German logical positivists, but in England he's just completely whoop, right over the head, because that's just how, I don't know. That's just how it is.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Yeah. So another thing that I found that was really useful in what you phrased to me was that, like that you think of your work as, let's say, a philosopher, as like bestowing intellectual gifts. I was just wondering if you could phrase that in your own way, or just like riff on that.
I guess I'll say it in Nietzsche's way. The highest virtue is gift giving, so being Santa. So like what is, like we all worship Santa, actually. Like Santa is a god, right? And he's the god that doesn't even exist. Like it's like we're teaching our children like this like very important epistemic lesson about the world. Now we all worship this thing, but he really doesn't exist. We all really enjoy it now here, you know, and you know, but that doesn't make Santa not God, right? So, yeah, I mean, yeah, like why worship Santa? Like, why is Santa cool? You know,
That's interesting. I mean,
like you're asking me like why Christmas? Okay, Grinch.
okay. Right.
So, but it has to, sorry, I'll draw it back. So, like when you're speaking to someone, you have to be concerned with them, right? You're talking, this is pathos, you're talking to their will to power. And their will to power has a certain manifestation. Now, it's easy to give kids gifts because you know exactly what a kid wants, what he needs, you know, because he has a very simple will to power, because actually there are universal things we can say about organisms with a will to power. Like, you know, you want to make anyone your friend, give them some food. Very simple. Like you're having a disagreement with a coworker, bring some donuts. The disagreement will just go away. We're very simple, silly. And yeah, so, but when you're giving someone an intellectual gift, you're giving them some strategy that should be true, but also enhance their path. So really the truth is already in them. It's already been nature and what they need in that moment. And pathos is identifying that and giving them that. So like true charisma is actually this.
Okay. You cut out there for a second, but
oh, I'm sorry.
I think I got the gist of it. I mean, like to go back to the thing about Santa, like one thing that came to mind was that Santa is not like a real historically existing figure, but like in a way he is real because we like decide to make him real, right? Like we perform all these you know, secretive actions around our targets, right? Right.
We even make sacrifices. We put out cookies for him. Like we
Right.
sacrifice cookies to Santa.
But then like, you know, it's almost like demonstrating that through, yeah, I guess like through cooperation and sacrifice, we can give birth to this like supernatural goodness, right? Like as you grow up, you realize that there's a lot of, you know, muddiness behind the scenes, right? Like it's not quite as pretty, right? It's like maybe like child slaves in China making these toys, you know, for, you know, 10 cents an hour or something. And then your parents like slaving away at a job that they hate, whatever. So it's not all, you know, flowers and rainbows, but it does make children really thrilled, right? And it does bring out the best in some people. And so I think it's strangely enough, it's not necessarily an insult to a religion, right? To say that it's similar to Santa, you know what I mean? Like
Santa is better than most religions. So
here's to Santa.
yeah. I don't have a drink on me. Yeah, you're participating in gift giving. So like when Nietzsche says the highest virtue is gift giving, like he's really serious about this. What he's talking about is actually altruism. And our so when he's talking on voluntary death, he's describing when it's correct to die. Coming back to your example from Buddhism about the acrobat falling and dying randomly. Like you might see that and say, oh, that's so pointless and meaningless and blah, blah, blah. And no, because the acrobat lives his life knowing he would be happy to die in an accident. He's happy to spend his life on this, right? And gift giving is the process of spending your life on someone else. So when we identify Santa this way, we're saying this generative process of spending yourself on someone else is something sacred. It's actually, that's all it is. It's I forget who said this. well, I'll use the Aristotelian version. Evil is labyrinthian, good is simple. Or evil is infinitely complex and good is simple. So Santa is as simple as you can make it without, being silly. So I don't take metaphysics seriously at all. The whole discipline, I think it's silly because it's just needlessly complex for no value to anybody. And like, I'm sure someone will get super triggered by me saying that, but seriously, like religions who are yelling about their metaphysics are you just they're putting their metaphysics, and behind it is a thinly veiled threat, right? It's an argument from intimidation, like, I will kill you, you believe this, right? And submitting to authority, like, I'm not going to tell anyone not to submit to authority. Like, you should submit to authority. You have no benefit in dying for this stupid shit. Like, you should live for something. You shouldn't die. But I mean, living and dying are the same thing anyway. But because the acrobat spends his life and he's happy to die, right? It's like a philosopher is happy to die as a consequence of his ideas. That would be like the best thing ever. That's like Socrates is, Christ-like figure, right? Like, Jesus dying for the sins of other people is exactly what he wanted to do. Like, sure, he's upset doing it. Like, his father, could this be any other way? But of course, we're all put in a state of fear and trembling before the end comes, right?
Fear and trembling before the end comes. All right. Well, I think that's a good note to...
Oh, that's so terrible.
Oh, really? You think so?
Yeah.
All right. So then let's end it to...
Hold on. Let me ask you a question. It's an old Aristotelian saw. Okay. What makes a good cat?
What makes a good cat? Okay, I know you wrote about this, so I have to come up with something better.
Well, just say the first thing that comes to mind. What makes a good cat?
I'd say what makes a good cat is its independence. That's what comes to mind.
Okay.
All right. What's your answer?
I'm not gonna give my answer. I gave my answer. The whole people had to listen to me. They don't have to listen to me anymore.
All right.
Oh, dude, your painting is so beautiful, by the way. Oh my gosh.
My Laocoon.
Yeah, dude. Oh my lord.
Yeah, thanks, dude. Yeah, so like you mentioned the like virtue is the ultimate excellence of man, right? And that like your virtue is in what your function is, like your function to do something. Or is that
I would read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics.
Okay.
I disagree, so I'm not going to accurately represent it probably because I don't remember the argument as I don't believe it. So
okay, well, in that case, I'll say another cheer to Santa and gift giving. That's a kinder note to end on.
Yeah,
anyway, thanks a lot for your time, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching or listening, and smash that like and subscribe, because if you don't, I will cry.